welcome to Thriving as a Physician, the podcast that teaches you to thrive in your weight loss and life while juggling a packed physician's schedule, because you deserve to thrive. Each week, I share sustainable, enjoyable tools that work in your busy life so that you can reach all of your goals faster with more confidence. Everything in this podcast is backed by my experience as an obesity medicine physician, years of coaching physicians on weight loss and eating, and my own personal weight loss journey. Let's get thriving. This podcast contains general educational information on weight loss for physicians. I am not providing medical advice, and listening to this podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship. This podcast does not replace the need for consultation with a licensed professional, and no information should be relied upon unless you have obtained specific advice or treatment from myself or another physician. Please review the terms and conditions located at www.weightsolutionsforphysicians.ca before continuing. Welcome to episode 353 of the Thriving as a Physician podcast, How to Lose Weight and Love Your Life. I'm your host, Siobhan Key. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. We are talking about how to stop thinking about food all the time. So if you are somebody who food fills your thoughts most of the day and it doesn't feel like you have control over that and it's driving you a little bit batty, this episode is for you. I'm going to show you why it happens, and some of these are ways and reasons that you probably haven't heard before, and then we'll talk about what to do about it. Practical strategies so that you can start having more space in your brain and not have it focus so much on food. And when I was thinking about this episode and preparing it, I was thinking about my own journey, and I really didn't realize how much food filled my thoughts until I started to get a handle on it. I really wasn't even aware how much I was thinking about food as I was going through it. It just felt to me like I had to, like this is just the way it was. I think I definitely for a long time thought that this is just how everybody was. And I had I had a meal with one of my practice partners who has a very different approach to food, like her brain just approaches food very differently. And it made me realize, I was like, wait, she obviously thinks completely differently about food than what I do. And I remember this was years and years and years ago when I was still really struggling with my weight. And I remember just having this like epiphany of like, what if the way I've experienced food isn't the way everybody does? And what if some of us think about food differently? And could I learn to do that? This was well before I heard anything about coaching or anything. But during the process of ordering at a conference, there was such a difference to how we were obviously thinking about the food while we were ordering it that it really started me thinking about how can I think differently about food? And then as I started to understand this stuff and started to actively do things, it was such a relief. And I'm going to share a little further in this episode one of the things I did very early on that really shut down a lot of the food chatter for me. And it's such a simple trick and it's kind of funny, but it worked. And it gave me this realization of like, oh, I can actually have space where my brain isn't thinking about food. Because when I look back on it, and maybe this is skewed slightly with just hindsight, but I really was thinking about food or my weight almost every opportunity I could. So obviously when I was busy with patients or directly taking care of my kids, I wasn't. But if I was driving like from home to work on lunchtime, breaks, driving work to home, at quiet times when I was at home and wasn't directly focused on something else, I was thinking about food or how to fix my eating or how to fix my weight almost all that time. And it felt like active problem solving. It felt like it was playing a role and it was important. And I don't know how much it actually was. In retrospect, I think it may have just been churning and just like over and over and over and over again and not coming up with solutions. And it was pretty exhausting, especially because most of that thinking about food was about how I had to fix it. I couldn't keep doing this. But then also a lot of that thinking about food was, but I really want this and can I eat this and maybe I could have this, right? It was like this back and forth. So if that's you, sharing that because I know what it's like. I've been there, and I've got some ideas that are probably going to help you. So let's start with, why do we think about food so much? What are the reasons that drive our focus? And like I kind of talked about it in my story, there is not everybody has the same experience. Not everybody thinks about food in the same way. If you do, it does not mean there's anything wrong with you. I think some of our brains are just genetically wired to be more attracted to food. And then for some of us, it's life experiences that have kind of wired our brains to be attracted and focused on food. And some people haven't had those experiences, or they have a different genetic makeup. It doesn't make one better than the other. And I want to really be clear about that. And I'm being clear about that because I think there is value if you do have one of those friends in your life that thinks differently about food, not to pattern yourself against them and be like them and try to change yourself so that you become a version like them. But there can be learning where I think it can be very helpful in a lot of different areas of our life. If you see somebody who relates to something differently than how you do, I think it can be really helpful to look and be curious and be like, how is it that they're thinking about that? Or if it's a friend who you're comfortable talking to, and you can ask questions directly about hey, just curious, how is it, how do you think about food when you're thinking about a snack? How do you think about that? Or how is food talked about in your house when you were growing up? And just learning from what some of the differences might be. There may be aspects that you can adopt. Again, not about that you need to be like them. There's nothing wrong on either side. But if their relationship to food seems to be more comfortable, like what you're wanting, there can be spaces to learn and borrow aspects. And I think when we've seen somebody else do it, it's sometimes easier to borrow and try to apply that in our own life. It's like kind of following. That's where I had a good analogy there. Like following along the old, see one, do one, teach one type thing, where watching somebody do it, you can be like, okay, I can see how that might be done. Now let me try it myself. Okay, but why do we think about food so much? Number one, I think this is the top reason why we think about food so much, is food is always restricted or feels like a moral decision with dire consequences. And this is diet culture, right? Where if I choose to eat the pizza, that has these huge moral consequences, like I failed, I'm never going to be successful, I've wrecked everything that I've done, sometimes it goes a lot further, I'm a bad person, I'm lazy, and can keep going. And so we've been taught through diet culture that we always have to be careful around food, and that if we make the wrong choice, it can be dire. It can mess up everything. It can wreck everything. And I want to say that if that's our belief around food, then of course you're going to think about it all the time. Think about anywhere else in your life where you perceive there could be dire consequences. It would make 100% sense that you think about it all the time, because it's dire consequences and you need to think about it to avoid them. Now, the thing with the food is there isn't actually dire consequences. The dire consequences have been made up, have been inflated, have been handed to us in order to try to get us to, buy diets and all that sort of stuff. And so they don't actually exist, but we still talk to ourselves and feel like they do. And our brain perceives that and focuses on the food because it perceives that there is significant risk and issue with these decisions. And so you need to focus and pay a lot of attention. And when you view it from that standpoint, it makes sense that we might think about food all the time when we have that approach. The second piece, which is related but a little bit different, is you're hungry or under eating. And that goes along still with the restriction side that a lot of people end up in when they're trying to manage their eating, but more biologically driven. So the first one is more mentally driven of I need to make sure I don't make the wrong choices. This one is more not enough fuel going into your body because you're trying to be careful to compensate for what you ate the night before. And your body is worried it is not getting enough fuel worries it might be in a famine and starts to increase hormones that make you hungrier, make you seek food more so that you eat and protect yourself from the possible famine. And what that looks like in your life is you wake up in the morning and you think about what you ate last night and you think about how you have to be extra careful today. And then you eat a little lightly or you don't eat in the morning. And towards the end of the day, you start to feel more hungry, and you may not actually feel the hunger. If you've been doing this for a long time, you might not notice the hunger, but your brain does and your hunger hormones do. And you start thinking about food, and then later in the day, you feel like you lose control. And so the thinking about food in that setting is because your brain perceives a risk to your survival, because it's thinking, why isn't there food around today? Okay, maybe food's short. We need to be careful, make sure we access it at every chance we can, which of course makes you think about food a whole lot. And of course, makes you more likely to feel out of control when you do start to eat, right? That's a pattern that makes sense when you look at it from that standpoint. Third reason why we think about food all the time is food is entertainment. In our society, food definitely is entertainment. Food is how we relate to people, how we socialize, how we celebrate, how we mourn, there's so many different ways that we use food. And for a lot of us, food is our source of entertainment. And that can be thinking about food, like thinking about what you want to eat, what could be good to eat, but also the act of eating can be the entertainment, right? And I think this happens a little bit sneakily to us in that as we become adults, we get busier and busier, and we stop taking time for ourselves and maybe stop doing fun things because there's always work or chores to do. We have an entertainment deficit. And so it makes sense that our brain turns to things that are easy to access for entertainment. And so social media, Netflix, streaming services, and food fits in there too. And that can be like I said, it can be the eating of the food, but it also can be just the thinking about food all the time can provide entertainment as well. And I never realized that this was as big of an issue for me until I kind of learned about the concept of food as entertainment. And I realized even when I was trying to eat healthy, I was constantly thinking about food and I was using it as an entertainment. I like to cook, so it seemed benign. It seemed like, oh, I'm just thinking about what could be good to make for this week. And, how am I going to cook the dinner tonight? And looking through cookbooks, looking online at recipes. But when we're constantly thinking about food, even when it's well-intentioned like that, it does build more desire. Our brains are getting cued constantly that, hey, food is important. We should be finding food. And so working on that side, the food is entertainment. And I've got a trick for you coming up that I used that made a big difference to shut down on a whole lot of food chatter for me. So it's something to consider. Where is it that you are using food as entertainment? And it might not just be eating when you're bored. Have a look and see if there's other places where it's showing up for you. The fourth, somewhat related, is well-intentioned planning. So it's the living life that's busy and you're just trying to keep all the balls in the air and you're thinking, okay, like what are we going to eat for dinner? And did I get that food out? And what am I going to grab for lunch? And it's like making food decisions all throughout the day and trying to plan, but where it ends up stretching through the day. And I think this happens to a lot of people just because of life and how busy life is. And so you end up trying to make sure that there's food around and good food, but it ends up where you're always thinking about food because you're always trying to plan the next thing. And then number 5, which is a big category, is food as a solution to something else. Why do we think about food? Well, a lot of the times it's because our brain perceives that food is a solution to something else. It's a solution to stress. It's a solution to feeling bad. It's a solution to feeling lonely. It's a solution to feeling uncertain, self-doubt. Like there's so many different things that our brain views food as a solution to. So a lot of our constantly thinking about food is because our brain is perceiving something else going on and is offering food as a solution. So if you're having a super stressful day, before you ever go get a snack, you probably are going to start having thoughts about food, because your brain's going to be like, hey, you're stressed out. Here, I've got something that'll help. Why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? I remember back in the day when I was really struggling with the Wendy's French fry thing, it could start at 10 a.m. where my brain was like, hey, maybe we should go to Wendy's at lunch. You know what would be nice? Let's go to Wendy's at lunch. And it would just sound like that. And it wasn't that there was something about the fries that truly were calling to me. It was a sign of the amount of stress I was taking on in the course of a day. And it was really just my brain was like, hey, let's try and fix some of this stress. This has worked in the past. Let's give it a try. You'll have a nice little break, gets you out of the office, right? Like there was a lot of things that were actually beneficial from that it felt like it was just telling me about fries, but it wasn't. It was trying to help me with a different issue. It just wasn't. The other issue is never really at the forefront usually. It's like the food stuff is there, and you have to kind of be curious to find out what the stuff behind it is. Okay, so what do we do? These are, I'm sure if I sat and brainstormed more, I could come up with more reasons, but this is a pretty comprehensive spectrum of why we think about food all the time. So what do you do about it? Number one, can we just let food be neutral? And I know that this, for a lot of you, is going to feel like risky, where you're like, but it's not neutral. It is not neutral. And the only reason why it feels that way is we've been taught to think about food that way, where we've been taught that there's good food, bad food, there's right and there's wrong. And that way of thinking is just messing you up. I swear it is not helping you reach any sort of goals long term. It makes you think about food more. It makes you think like you have to hold on tight to your food and your food decisions, and you have to struggle with them. And if we let the food be neutral, take away that high stakesness, take away all the restrictive type thinking and talk to ourselves that we do of like, I can't have that, I shouldn't have that, I'm not allowed that. If we can let go of that restriction and let the food be neutral, what ends up happening? It makes it easier to make decisions that are probably in line with your goals. The food won't have the same pull. You're not going to be obsessing about food so much because it's not this like dire consequence thing in your life anymore. And it lets food decisions become simpler, lower risk, not a big deal. If you choose something that doesn't directly help you with your health goals, it's not a huge deal because it doesn't have all this moral failing attached to it. And you just make a healthier choice the next time without fighting with it the same way. Now, I know that if you're newer in this space, if you haven't played around with all the stuff, that may feel really scary. You may be like, I don't even know how to do. And it's one of the biggest things we work on inside my coaching programs is like, how do we change how we're thinking about the food to make it easier to make the healthy decisions? And it does take a bit of practice, and it takes often a little bit of support, honestly, to get that shift in thinking, because the restrictive high stakes version is so deeply embedded. We've had so much practice with it, and we've heard from so many different places in our life that that should be the way we're thinking about it. So don't panic if you're like, neutral, I can't do it. I can't do it. Don't worry. It's okay. Just start practicing. And you can start practicing with a, what if it was actually more neutral than what I think? Try that on for a bit and just see how that goes. Number two, fuel your body earlier in the day. If you're always obsessing about food and you think you're probably under eating earlier, just eat more earlier in the day. Now, again, I know that this is going to set off some panic alarms for some people, and that's okay. Maybe I should label this episode the episode that's going to make you panic. Don't worry about it. Do it as an experiment. But if you eat more earlier in the day, when you're used to restricting yourself earlier in the day, generally what will happen is your brain will be quieter around food. You won't get into that kind of obsession thing to the same degree. And also, in the evenings, you probably will feel more in control around food. It may not solve all the overeating, but it probably will solve a good percent of it because you won't have the biological drive. Your brain just will probably feel quieter. People panic and worry that if they start eating earlier in the day, it's just going to keep going and keep spiraling, but it won't. This is different. This is when we start earlier in the day and we're talking to ourselves about, okay, I need to make sure I fuel my body really well. I need to make sure I'm satisfied at breakfast, lunch. We're sending much different messages, and we're not sending messages that end up in that spiral. So play with it. If it makes you panicky, do it as an experiment. I always say, if the idea of eating more earlier in the day makes you worry you're going to gain a bunch of weight, do it as a 2-week experiment. Tell yourself, I'm just going to try this, see what it's like. Nothing bad is going to happen in 2 weeks. And it'll give you time to just test out and see, what is the impact for me if I focus on eating more earlier in the day and get out of that like early in the day restriction. Number 3, notice where your brain is using food as entertainment and find other ways. So being curious about all the different ways your brain might be using food as entertainment. Like, I love watching Food Network. Like I said, I love cookbooks. So I would sometimes sit and just read cookbooks, think about the different things I could cook, which is a lot of fun. And it is like a big hobby for me. And I know some of you are cringing because it is not your hobby, and that's totally fine. But it was a lot of thinking about food. So for you, look around and be like, where is it that it comes up? And where am I using it more for entertainment than anything else? And are there other ways that I could entertain myself? Are there other ways that I could engage my brain that wouldn't build the desire to want to eat more? The trick I used back when I realized how much I was thinking about food all the time is I just practiced a brand new thought. And because the thought was totally opposite of what I was doing currently and what I believed about myself, I gave it a persona. So I would say to myself, I'm just not that interested in food. Every single time my brain would be like starting to talk about food, I would respond, I'm just not that interested in food. But I gave it this like posh, fancy persona. I pictured wearing like some sort of fancy hat and being like, I'm just not that interested in food. Like somebody who'd like never had a food issue in her life was the persona that I was using, who couldn't even be bothered to think about food. And I share that because the fact it was a little bit funny, I think helped it work. And what's really interesting when you're working on changing thoughts is you can do that. You can change to a thought that is completely opposite of how you currently think. And if you practice it enough, you start to adopt it. So every time my brain would start to go down a path about food, I'd be like, oh, you know what? I'm just not that interested in food, over and over and over again. And it was a lot initially. But after a few days of doing that, my brain stopped talking about food. And it worked really well. I just was not as focused on food. I became that person that I'm just not that interested in food, though I did not buy a fancy hat. Partly because I have a giant head and they're hard to find, but also probably wouldn't really go with my overall look. But so play with it. You can have fun with it, but you also can just kind of insert a thought like that may not feel true at all right now. But the more you practice any sort of thought, the more that becomes your truth. And you start to take on that identity. And that can be a really powerful tool to try in this area. So if your brain's just like food, play with that. Put on a fancy hat in your head and just be like, I'm just not that interested in food. Put on a little bit of an accent and practice it over and over again and see how it works. All right. Number 4, if you're just like have that well-intentioned planning, you're just trying to keep the food flowing through your house. And if you're a mom, you know what that's like. That usually what everybody is eating is up to you. And if you stop planning, then nobody has any food experience. My husband's like, why are you always thinking about food? Like, you finish a meal and I'm like, okay, what are we doing for dinner tonight? And I'm like, because if I don't, nobody eats. Like, we end up eating out. So if this is you, then just set time in the day to make the decisions once. So rather than having the decision ongoing and the conversation ongoing, which takes a lot of energy and a lot of brain space, sit down, give yourself 5-10 minutes, plan out the food once. Now, I'm not saying plan the food in the sense of, plan how many calories you can have and that sort of thing. I don't like that type of planning of the food because it buys into restriction and generally will feel not great. I'm saying condense the time you are already planning the food that you or your family is going to eat into a smaller section of the day, giving yourself the gift of, that's done. We don't have to worry about it anymore. We don't have to think about that because I've planned it out. So it's not like food planning in the diet sense, which I think at times can be helpful if done correctly and done carefully so there's no restriction and it actually might feel abundant. This is food planning in the time management sense of I'm just going to jot down what we're doing for food throughout the day so I don't have to keep thinking about it. It can be like a download. Load off your brain. You can have space in your brain to think about the other stuff. Generally, it'll help time management wise too, because then you can probably figure out like, oh, okay, if we're doing this for dinner, do I have to get stuff out before I leave for work, or do I have to, get some stuff prepped or pick up stuff? Like, it'll help you organize yourself on what you need throughout the day, but just taking that time, planning it out once in the day or once every couple days, planning a couple days in a row can even be more efficient. Planning for the week. I do this for our family in that I plan dinners for the week. I don't plan the rest of the food, but that's because generally lunches are leftovers for me, just to make it super easy. So just planning out the dinners for the week is something that works well. And then, everything else kind of flows. Like breakfast is just standard stuff that you have around the house. Don't have to think about food very much. Number 5, addressing the biggest one, the other things, like food is a solution to other things. This is really what I talk about. So if this is a big area, and it probably is a significant area for most of you, make sure you're listening to the podcast and go back and listen to other episodes, because this one does take some time and some understanding and some figuring out all the different ways your brain might be using food to try to help you, right? It's not bad intention. It's not trying to be mean or manipulate. It's trying to help you. But to start, just be curious about what might it be that my brain's trying to fix with the food? What might it be that it's trying to help me with? And learning and understanding what are the things your brain is trying to solve with food. And everybody's different, but it's okay if when you start to look at, you're like, my brain is trying to solve everything with food. That's okay. Nothing's gone wrong. It's pretty common. And it makes sense because your brain starts with a couple things in your life where it's like, oh, we're super stressed, like let's eat, and oh, okay, I feel a bit better. And the issue with your brain, with the part of your brain that seeks the food to feel better, is it sees things just only in the short term, only in the immediate, what happens now. And when we eat food, especially like processed food that's high in sugar and stuff, you do get dopamine and you do feel better. We all know that. When you eat to feel better, you do have that immediate like, oh, okay, I feel a bit better. It just doesn't last. And like it might be gone before you swallow the food. It might be gone within minutes. It doesn't actually address the true underlying issue, but it does work momentarily. So the fact your brain has taken on different things and added, okay, food can fix this, food can fix that, food can fix that, food can fix that, makes sense. It makes sense that it's using food. That part of your brain can't see that it doesn't last very long. And so just start by being curious. Just start by understanding, okay, where might I be using food to fix something else? And then from there, you can get curious about, okay, what else could I do? And how could I catch that feeling or emotion or situation earlier before my brain jumps in with an offer of food? All of those. But like I said, if you go back in the podcast episodes, you'll find lots of episodes that are going to help you with that. And honestly, if you're tired of thinking about food all this time, and if some of these ideas I've offered sound good, but you're like, I don't really know how I would make that work in my life, that's because this stuff is deeply embedded, and often you do need support to really change it, because we just default to our old patterns really, really easily. And so that's why I offer coaching programs. And right now I have 2 different programs available. One is called Thrive Academy for Overeating, and that is open to everybody. Absolutely everybody is welcome. Anybody who feels out of control with food and wants help feeling more in control, where they can eat healthy consistently so they can reach your health goals. That's what we do inside Thrive Academy for Overeating. And then I have the Thrive Fellowship, which is a physician-only program. So if you're a physician and you want that physician-only space, it still exists, don't worry. And Thrive Fellowship includes Thrive Academy for Overeating plus physician-only coaching calls. And so you have the option of either one, whichever one works best for you. but both will help you change your relationship with food. And there's no right answer. It's just whichever one feels more comfortable, and will help you change your relationship with food for life, where you don't always have to be struggling with this. I mean, you can relax in any food environment, no matter what food's there or what people are eating. You can learn how to be comfortable and also still feel in control. So if that feels amazing, then check it out at start2thrive.ca. That's start2thrive.ca to learn more about the program, and you can just register right away from there. And if you want the physician-only program, I'm like mind blanking on how we have it set up right now. Anyways, if you don't easily find access to it on that page, the registration page, then just send an email, info@weightsolutionsforphysicians.ca. Tell me that you want access to that program, that you want to do the physician-only version, and we'll get you set up. All right. Have a fantastic day, guys. We'll talk to you later.